Now we have a panel discussion on economic realities of ESG, achieving net zero infrastructure. Our discussion will touch upon the points like how CFOs are navigating to deliver both the business transformation necessitated by the changing climate and the returns investors pursue as they discharge their fiduciary duties. How can the government support the same, and so on? I would like to invite Amol Dete, editor, ETCFO, to moderate the discussion. Over to you, Amol.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, with another Power Pack session. I'm here with three top speakers from the industry. And let me tell you, this session is going to be really interesting because here we are going to discuss the hardcore insights about the net zero or the carbon neutrality or the ESG, or we call it sustainability. The name of this session is Economic Realities of ESG, Achieving Net Zero Infrastructure. And welcome to ETCFO Leadership Summit. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome to the top speakers that I have with me here. My first speaker for this panel discussion is Mr. Raman Chopra, CFO GHCL. Mr. Chopra, glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amol.
My next speaker is Mr. Sandeep Modi, CFO Hindustan Zinc Limited. Mr. Modi, glad to have you.
Thank you, Amol, and I'm glad to be here representing Hindustan Zinc.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Modi. And my next speaker is Ms. Sonal Shrivastava, Regional CFO APAC, Holcim. Ms. Shrivastava, glad to have you.
Thank you so much, Amol, and pleasure being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So to begin with, I have a few common questions, and then I will also get into some specific questions. But, the common question is pledging to achieve net zero emissions. What it would cost, what it could bring, and what could it take to fulfill that ambition? I will start with you, Mr. Raman.
Yeah, basically, first of all, this is a journey, pledging this, becoming a net zero. It means what we are talking about is becoming almost carbon zero over a period of time. And today we are one of probably the fourth largest polluter as a nation, I would say. But in recent, climate summit where our Prime Minister has made a pledge that by 2070 we will become a net zero. I think this is a step in the right direction, and within that, probably he has made 4 or 5 commitments whereby he's talking about, increasing our renewable energy by almost from 150 gigawatt to almost 500 gigawatt by 2030, and probably increasing the footprint of renewables by significant numbers. What it would cost, probably it will be a very difficult question, what it's going to cost. Probably initial estimate put by the government is $1 trillion support from the developed world. But I would say this is just the beginning. That will probably catapult some of the initiatives which the government is trying to make this nation a net zero. But the cost is going to be, I would say, monumental. It's just the beginning that $1 trillion is being talked about. But at the same time, I would say it is the things that would be required will be I would say a very close interaction or close coordination between the government as a nation, because we have to have a right action plan to achieve this big mission of becoming net zero. So right coordination between the government, bureaucracy, and the India Inc. They need to come together so that we work towards a common goals or common objectives. And there is, everybody works in the same direction, and each of the constituents will have their own roles. And it's going to take, I would say, in terms of creating a lot of investment on the technology front, because really, at the moment, this is at a nascent stage. Some of the summits which I have attended is at a nascent. What is that is polluting? Gathering a lot of data and then correlating that data and coming out what all needs to be done. Creating, I would say, alternate cost economical alternate solutions towards that. And then it requires a lot of creating a lot of awareness, among the workforce, among all the constituents, by whether it's India Inc., creating a lot of training and awareness of that. And at the last but not the least, putting together a lot of infrastructure. And so infrastructure in various formats, that probably all will take. But I would say it will require a lot of coordination and strong will at all those three, constituents, which is government, bureaucracy, and India Inc. So it's kind of an iron triangle that needs to get created. Okay. That is what is from my side.
Sure, Mr. Raman. I think valid points here. Good opening remarks. Let me shift my focus to Sonal now. Sonal, you heard Raman talking about his perspective. He mentioned close coordination, awareness, infrastructure issues, and all. So, I would also like you to share your perspective on what would be the cost, how will it bring, and how would it be take it. How should we fulfill that ambition of pledging the net zero emissions?
Yes, thank you so much, Amol. I will just elaborate on some of the points that Raman has made. See, what is there is the ESG topic is universal. However, when we look at solutions in India, we need to be pretty local, because in India, we have to think about growth as well as sustainability together. We have a population, whether we like it or not, which needs to be pulled out of the poverty line, right? So I think India has a huge opportunity to play a leading role here, and also give some inputs to the world. That's really one aspect that I see. As far as the whole journey is concerned, India is still at a nascent stage compared to some of the other countries like Europe and UK and US. Why so? Because some norms have evolved there already. Regulations have evolved there already. There are some mandatory requirements that the companies have to fulfill. I think there is this little journey that we have to go down the route. Looking at the cost or our journey, I think 2-3 things stand out. One is whatever we are doing today in India is based on technologies which have been there for, let's say, 20-30 years, whether it is our processes, ESG, the environment part of ESG is really defined in 3 parameters, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Scope 1 is really focusing on the manufacturing part. And you see, everybody is using technology which has been there for the last 20-30 years, right? That is helping us decarbonate. But the future, when you talk about zero carbon, net zero, I think there's a newer technologies have to play a role. We have to push those technologies, and government, of course, has a very big role to play here. Second, if you look at the funding or the cost of it, we are already seeing a huge shift in investor preference. So there is huge capital available to finance such technologies or finance these companies which are willing to make these shifts. Overall, if you see in 2020, if I'm not mistaken, the ESG criteria, the AUMs which were filtering investment by ESG criteria had already touched $40 trillion, and which is expected to go to 50 trillion in 2025, which is almost 1/3 of the AUM out there. So there is money, and it's looking out for those investments by startups or by corporates to make that initiative and come to play. The third part, I must say, is that the government has to look at a holistic policy. So not a policy here and there, depending upon promoting one type of renewable energy or, one kind of efficiency technology, but a holistic policy which covers all aspects of this whole journey of net zero. And when we look at the MNCs per se, I think the MNCs have already gone ahead and committed to net zero targets much ahead of the 2070 target given out by the Prime Minister. So, for example, our own company has given out a 2050 target. And we not only looking at 2050, but we have very interim milestones now defined for 2025, 2030. And unless we do that breakup, have those defined breakups, obviously we will not get there as a nation or as a community or as a corporate. So I think not to do, and an exciting journey starting for sure.
Wonderful thoughts, Sonal here. Let me come to you, Sandeep, and take your perspective now.
Yeah. So if we talk at a macro level, looking at the data, more than 70 countries, which are like accounting more than 80% of the global carbon emission, has been like 90% of the global GDP have put net zero commitments. And it involves, as Sonal has said, a lot of corporates. So almost, I would say 5,000 plus companies have been a part of the United Nations Race to Zero campaign. While we see These commitments yet to be supported by a detailed plan or executed. In my view, while the imperative to reach net zero is increasingly recognized, the net zero equation is not solved. The state of affairs should not be surprising given that scale of task at hand. Achieving net zero emission by 2050 would entail a fundamental transformation of the global economy. I would say the key requirements encompassing the three categories of: one is the physical building blocks, economic and societal adjustments, and governance, institutional, and commitment. These all would need to be fulfilled against the backdrop of many economic, for example, inflation, political challenges, for example, polarization within and among the countries. A net zero transition, in my view, would have a significant and often front-loaded effect on demand, capital allocation, cost, and jobs. So if we see a capital allocation point of view, I was just reading the report of McKinsey, it talks about almost $275 trillion of cumulative spending on the physical assets would itself be needed for achieving the 2050 target of the net zero. In terms of the cost, due to shift in the various production processes and capital expenditure, while total cost of ownership would fail, but it requires a lot of investments. Sectors would be like, in my view, will be unevenly exposed to the transition. Those with the high emission products or operation would be specifically affected. The transition would unevenly affect lower income and fossil fuel resource producing countries and lower income consumers everywhere. In terms of, I will also say one aspect of the jobs, the net zero transition analyzed could lead to a reallocation of labor as well. One notable characteristic of the job losses can be there, and others say maybe it will be gains due to the net zero transition. It would be, in my view, it would be concentration in specific sectors and geographical regions. What it will bring, what we see, it will bring, it is important to note the view transition as not only onerous. The required economic transformation will not only create immediate economic opportunity, but also open the prospect of a fundamentally transformed global economy with a lower energy cost and numerous other benefits. If you see give the example like Hindustan Zinc, we have taken like Sonal was saying about the Holcim, it's similarly for Hindustan Zinc, our long-term target to reach net zero emission is by 2050. And we are moving ahead in the direction of closure of our thermal power plants in a phased manner, swiftly, completely from fossil to green grid connectivity. It is also our ambition to convert all our mining equipment to battery operated vehicle. We have planned to invest around $1 billion in the next 5 years in our mining and renewable business. Climate change risk assessment is also, we have also started a disclosure in the as per the TCFD guidelines. So Hindustan Zinc has always been the climate leader. As it stands today, we are ranked first for the 5th consecutive year in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index amongst the Asian metal and mining peers, and 5th globally. So these are my perspective in terms of what cost would be required, what it will have an impact, and what should be the imperative for towards the net zero.
I'll also like to jump in what Sonal has said. I think what point she has made a very right point. In India, probably there has to be a right balance of growth because we are a growing nation and with a lot of population. So on one side, we have to balance the growth. On the other side, we'll have to see that, we achieve that, target of becoming a net zero. While she is right that now we are using the technologies which are there in place to, and adopting the India Inc. is adopting those technology, particularly on the solar side or on the wind side or some other renewable area. But I would say still, even at a global level, some technologies are yet to come. Particularly if you're some of the technologies which you are using in your processing, let's say your boilers, and you want to replace the fossil fuel, you don't have those technologies. They are just at a very, very nascent stage, even globally also. I was reading one of our biggest leaders in our industry, which is soda ash. They have recently announced that they are tying up with a company called Veolia, where they are going to replace their boilers with a new technology called refused derived fuel, which is going to replace all their fossil fuel run boilers. Very expensive cost. So probably that will take some years before that gets into our nation. So probably as we move forward, we'll have that balance of embarking upon this journey with the right kind of technology as well as the right targets, like I said, step-by-step targets, where we either become by 2050 or as a nation by 2070. But I think she's right that India can set an example in this direction.
Okay, very well said, Raman and Sandeep, I guess. I think why the thoughts are really meaningful here from all of you is because all of you are representing a sector which are very important for the climate change and the sector that we are talking about right now, sustainability and the carbon nutrition. Somebody's from construction side, somebody's from the mining side. I think that's why the thoughts are really meaningful here. And as we received some dope in terms of the data from Sandeep. There was a survey of Deloitte which said that about 94% of Indian stakeholders agree that taking immediate action can limit the worst impacts of climate change, and Indian businesses rank fifth in their concern for climate change. So some meaningful thoughts here. Let me move ahead and bring Sonal back in the conversation, and let me get into some specific questions to all of you. So Sonal, when I was going through your Holcim, website, what I learned is, you are the world leader in recycling with up to 50 million tons of materials recycled across our businesses this year. That was the headline on the website. And your goal is to recycle 100 million tons by 2030. My question to you is based on this information, that how critical it is, point number one, and what are the critical barriers that hinder the uptake of renewable energy and recyclable for 100% renewable power operations? Because ultimately, if your goal is to recycle 100 million tons, I'm sure you must be facing a lot of challenges while doing this.
Very true. So first, let me talk about the recycled material. What's the benefit and why we're giving out numbers and very specific numbers. So as you know, we manufacture cement, and the one ingredient in cement is clinker, which is an intermediary product. And this is very high in carbon emission because it's produced with burning fossil fuel. Yeah. Now, one key element and a very quick element to achieve low carbon is to reduce the clinker factor. The amount of clinker we are consuming, just reduce that by mixing with some waste. And in India, it's been quite prevalent for a long time because we use fly ash, which is a waste from the power plants, and we use slag, which is a waste from the steel plant, and we have been recycling, adding into our clinker, and we have been able to sort of use this recycled waste. However, there's much more to that. Now what we have started doing is replacing fossil fuel in the manufacturing process with other alternative fuels, which are also waste from some industries. They're hazardous fuels we can sort of burn. We can burn plastics, we can burn a lot of recycled or the municipal waste items. So there's a lot of area to work on as far as alternative fuel is concerned. And this is green. And cement is one rare industry which can really consume all the waste in burning itself. And so this is our key focus. And this is, by the way, also economic. So here we are not in conflict with is it a good payback? Is it good for the business? Is it good for the bottom line? The more you do it, the better it is going to be for the bottom line. So that's a win-win for us. We've also gone to look at other areas, for example, recycling of construction waste and recycling of in concrete. Concrete is the main material which is used for construction. The aggregates which go into the concrete or the cement which goes into the concrete, we're looking at recycling that. Here, the challenge is that we fall short of regulations. We have to have those ISI approved mixed designs and, government allowing these materials to be input in projects. So there is a building code or a construction code which needs to evolve, which will help us further increase these recycle waste. Yeah. What was your other question? I missed. Just can you remind me?
Sure. Let me repeat. So my whole idea was, when you're putting the 100% target, 100 million tons by 2030. What are the major challenges that you face, and how will you actually go for this renewable powered operation?
So remember, when we're looking at this process, whether it is alternative fuel or whether it is adding waste, or it is also renewable energy for electricity going to for solar, wind, or other forms of energy, what we're always talking about is decarbonization. That means reducing the CO2 element. So far, we haven't gotten to, making it zero. And it is not easy to go down the route of making it complete zero. That's a fundamental technological challenge that we have to overcome. For example, the technology of carbon capture today. I mean, we are all experimenting with it, but it is not a commercial product yet. We cannot put it into a commercial deployment because it's just so expensive. And there is no incentive to do it also. For example, there is no carbon tax. Imagine if there was a carbon tax, one would then be forced to look at adopting these technologies, right? So right now, first of all, these technologies are expensive, still being worked on. Second, there is no incentive to adopt it as of now from a business standpoint. But I think we are evolving. We'll get there. Regarding renewable energy, why it can't go to 100%, I can just give a simple example. Renewable energy itself is intermittent because, the production of renewable energy is not throughout the day. It's not across all geographies because you'll have solar intensity somewhere, wind available somewhere, or water available somewhere else. Also, the grid connections, how the grid will handle an increased output of renewable energy. It's not, there is no technology of storage around that. So it is easy to increase the percentage of a green portfolio in our energy mix, maybe 40%. But after that, it again becomes a technological challenge. It becomes a policy challenge. It becomes an infrastructure challenge, and how you sort of transmit that. So all this will also we have to solve in some manner, either through incentives or through policies or technology innovations.
I would like to add here, while it is more about the industry, but if you see the overall larger scale of the India, the most important challenge in my view is for the renewable is the poor financial condition of the power distribution companies, which are DISCOMs. Because most of which are owned by state government, and almost all renewable energy is purchased by such DISCOM, resulting in a very long and unsustainable payment cycle. That is also something which you have to see from the overall India perspective. So one is the industry, which we are talking about the 100% renewable operation, because ultimately it's a government has taken a place, then corporate, then ultimately is a consumer. So the consumer has to get the power from the grid, and this has to be purchased by the renewable energy by the DISCOM. So DISCOM also reforms have to be made to make sure that the renewable energy companies remain sustainable in terms of getting the payments on time. Because if we see the data, it's a public 2 lakh crores kind of thing, almost dues by the DISCOM, which includes the renewable energy kind of companies as well. So I think that aspect also has to be seen if we have to see overall India perspective by 2070, overall renewable energy, not only the corporate operation, but also the overall India.
Just to add what Sandeep has said, and Sonal has also mentioned you want to increase your portfolio of renewable, but then the availability of land, grid evacuation, those are big challenges, and corporates are willing to make an investment there. But these challenges also need to be, handled as we move forward.
I think very important points that you raised, Raman, and I want you to elaborate more and add more in terms of what are the challenges a CFO like you face, because you come from a background of chemical, textiles, and consumer products, right? And ultimately, we all have to achieve, the ESG goal. So what are the other realities that you would like to share, which you face, which you think are a major challenge?
See, very rightly said, the first challenge as you are embarking upon this journey, ESG, in the last 5 years, there have been a lot of, dynamics which are changing. So, bringing PAN organization, first, it requires a lot of cultural change, or I would say change management. So bringing it across the organization, making the operating teams see the reason that why it is needed. That is the first challenge that you encounter when you propagate it, because the operating teams are still, they have to meet their own KPIs and targets. So rolling out and making it as a part of the organization mission is the first challenge you may see. The second challenge, I would say, again, it is a journey. Your vendor partners, you deal with many MSMEs. With those MSMEs, they don't have those kind of technology or the resources, or I would say even the knowledge and the understanding as to where they want to go. So, let's say if you're dealing with 1,000 MSMEs vendors and you want to, make them at par with your vision and your understanding, it is a big journey, which we have started. I would say we are at a very, very early stage, and making them also become a partner with us in this mission is going to be a big challenge as we are moving forward. So this is my personal experience there. Our commercial teams, our sustainability teams, and some outside experts are also working closely with these vendors. And you cannot have a legislation or a force whereby you can really force them to adopt this. This has to be naturally evolved over a period of time with a lot of training, with a lot of making them understand that this is the need of our end. Without that, probably they'll not have their businesses remaining unless until they make that change. So that is the second challenge. The third challenge is, as Sonal and Sandeep has also covered, the availability of technology. As I said, in our textile journey, it was very easy to adopt. We went from, my first project in my company was putting up a windmill way back in 2004. And, it was a very nice experience. And thereafter, we have added a lot of solar portfolio also. And all are very easy. And that in textile, it was very easy to migrate, and probably will be 85% of our entire energy requirement will be meeting through, in our textile business through probably the technology is a big constraint. We have looked at in Europe, some of the, competition has gone into usage of biomass. Here in India, probably I was in another seminar where they said almost 500 million tons of biomass is there, which is not being used at all. So can we create some infrastructure for the usage of this biomass for our, boilers? So that is where is the struggle. So that is another challenge which we are looking at. We are exploring that possibility, how we can, move towards that direction. And next point is that, as I said, solar, land, grid availability, and storage technology. That is another challenge which is there. Now we are a very big, like other my colleagues are also probably having a lot of logistics in their business portfolio. So we are also heavily logistics dependent. So we want to convert our entire logistics to a carbon zero. Probably it will require again a lot of infrastructure development, charging station, making those transporters, invest into those new EV vehicles. So probably that will be another journey that we'll have to do. So these are some of the challenges that we are facing, but at the same time, this also gives us an opportunity to start working on all these things, so that as we take this journey forward, we know that these are the action points. We have to work upon these and make it a carbon zero organization as we move forward.
Okay, so Sandeep, Raman mentioned his challenges and the action points as well. You're also in an industry, where it is very important for you to go for ESG and understand the economic reality. So, what are the challenges that you face? You also said some time back that the battery-operated operations, they are already trying your best to use that. So, apart from that, how actually you are trying at your company to achieve your ESG goal?
So we are doing a couple of things, like in our smelters, we are a power intensive business. So we are moving in the phased manner. How do we, by 2025, how do we increase our share of 5 to 6% of the renewable power to the 50%? So we are in the advanced stage of replacing one of the thermal power plants at a location to completely replace by the renewable power. So that is the one thing which we are doing. So apart from a battery operated vehicle, we are also like scope 2 and scope 3, engaging with our supply chain managers and supply chain vendors, how they do replace their vehicles from the carbon emission reduction point of view. I would also touch base about the challenges which we are facing as a CFO. I think we always focus on the total shareholder return. I think now we have to be a balancing or move from the total shareholder return to total societal impact. That is something we will have to see. Companies will have to shift gears in terms of their ESG, considering the business impact of the ESG, disclosure requirements, and investors' push. And as a CFO, we'll have to play a pivot role in this transformation, as we are the ones which must help bridge between the TSR and a TSI. So we'll have a clear vision, a North Star, which will be coherently cascaded into the key CFO's activity. So as the challenges would be like, we will have to have planning and target setting of the various KPIs. How do we link the incentives and compensation of the executives? We have to help the CEOs business partnering. Capital management will be a very big task which have to be done. There are no standardization of the disclosure and the reporting. Somebody reports in the GRI, some of the TCFD. How do we standardize and compare the companies within that? And most important is, how do we communicate to the investors? So that is something which we all are here focusing and having our commitment and how we keep on updating our ESG commitment and status update. I'm sure many of the companies already started. We also started from the last quarter what we have the committed and how we are moving progressing towards that what we are doing, because this is something now not onerous but also as a fiduciary, or I will say as a practicality thing which has come. So CFOs will need to really review their functional strategy and linkage to the other ESG stakeholders.
Very valid point. In fact, I wanted to come on that shareholder aspect because, traditionally, or the CFOs, or the most integral role of the CFO is to, create a shareholder's value, look at the capex far more rationally, focus on the profit. But, are the shareholders, are the top management of the companies, the board of directors now looking at ESG very seriously? How tough it is for CFOs to actually handle, the balance sheet in terms of focusing on ESG, because it's not just achieving that goal. You have to also make provisions, to achieve that goal. You have to also make investments to achieve that goal, right? I will take this question with all of you, starting from Sonal.
So I'll speak about Holcim Group, since our ESG journey started a little, some 2-3 years ago, I think we've made some good progress in this regard. So first and foremost, I think what we have done is we have defined our targets in each of the parameters, whether it is CO2, whether it is circular economy, whether it is on the social side, how we impact lives, so on and so forth. Now, these targets, the first thing that we did was we didn't leave these targets or the calculation of these targets or measurements of these targets to, let's say, the sustainability department. So finance has taken a lead here. What we have done is we have integrated this into our financial reporting system, which is SAP. So now these targets are actually validated, collected at the source, that is, let's say, a plant or a warehouse, whatever it may be, and it is fed right through, and there is a validation point or looking at these calculations all throughout. So there is a hierarchy which has been established. Why this is necessary? Because when we put out a sustainability report and we put out some numbers there, and now those sustainability reports are viewed by the external investors and the external world, and you can't go wrong on those numbers. Point number one. Point number two, we have got a kind of an assurance mechanism to validate these numbers. In our case, it is E&Y. Now, obviously, E&Y then looks at an audit trail. I think these are the basic hygiene a CFO can put in place together with other business stakeholders. And it's very important because you don't want to restate your numbers or targets, you realize, oh, it's not correct. And then 2-3 years down the line, you restate the numbers, or how far you are, that team has to know how far we are from the target, what all we can do. So I think that data validation, data collection, and data assurance is something that the CFOs can do. Point number one. Point number two, I think it's very much into the DNA of the business now, starting from the board to the investors, to the management, because what we have realized is that now investors are so active in this forum that they can virtually not trade in your stocks. So if you do not take this ESG seriously, you will start to see a portfolio investor universe dwindle for you. And that, of course, something we cannot afford. So we take a lot of feedback from the investors in our sessions to see, what else they would like us to do, what are the questions and the concerns that they have. And we incorporate that into our program as well. Third point is CapEx. Again, it's about measurement, because what we have put out there is also something called green CapEx, that we will be doing green CapEx. But how do you define green CapEx? How is it different from a normal CapEx? What kind of return expectations would we be comfortable with in this green CapEx? So it is a framework we have put in place, and it's very important for CFOs to start looking at this and communicating to the investor world on what it really means by green CapEx. And lastly, I would say is that, at the end of the day, this is a very close collaboration with all the people involved, So it's not the CFO acting alone or the sustainability officer acting alone or the CEO acting alone, we're all together in this. And therefore the programs which need to be devised, starting from the board level, has to be very, very cohesive. And when we are internally cohesive, we will be credible to the world, credible to the outside, So we have to really get that homework done very well.
Fantastic. I think really valuable insights there. I'm sure the audience must be enjoying these thoughts we are sharing here, because not everybody is talking in so much details, and specifically the CFOs who are, the architect of, the green capex that you said. Thank you so much, Sonal here. Raman, your views.
No, I think Sonal has touched very valid points, and probably we have also started our journey 3 years back. And exactly, and we, in our size of company, probably we will be the first company we started IR reporting, and again, EY is our partner in this journey. There also, it was very, I'll take her first point first. It was a very collaborative effort because, as I said, this is a change management. CFO, with their ears on the ground, they know what ESG is the hard fact, is a reality. And it can really have, a strong impact on the business. Business is important, growth is important, operations are important, but at the same time, ESG initiatives are equally important. Once that realization sets in, the first role I would say CFO along with, sustainability and CEOs, the role is, to align the teams together, because without alignment of your operating teams, you also see the merit in this, you can't get any success out of that. And with that, and that is a change management, and it takes not months, sometimes it takes years before they start realizing, yes, the leadership is ready to make some sacrifices, because initially there'll be some sacrifices will be made when you do this journey of ESG. They are not ready to compromise on their efficiency or KPIs or production, but at the same time, the need of the hour is that you require some of the initiatives which probably will call for those sacrifices in a shorter period of time, but longer time they'll be beneficial. So taking them along is the first step that you do. And once you create that framework whereby each business decision or a capex or a growth initiative is looked upon from the ESG lenses, then I would say the first leg of the transformation gets complete. And there, I think CFOs are playing a very important role. And that is what I'm just telling you from our perspective, from my experience, that, taking the teams along and buying in of that. Once that happens, then you get amazing solutions to various issues on the ESG side from the operating teams. And those are amazing solutions you get. The second thing is the commitment. Once those solutions come, the second, I would say the transformation happens when you allocate resources, be it financial, be it human, be it technical. If you start allocating and give a priority to those issues, that is where the, this transformation gets more strength. And that has been our experience in the last 3-4 years. And the third piece is the review mechanism. The framework which you put in the organization, where you review these ESG or sustainable initiative ahead of the business operations by the top management. Then, the people at every level see the seriousness of the initiatives that you are taking. And as Sonal has said, all those initiatives are there, whether you are setting the target for GHG emission reduction, like we have a 20% reduction target 3 years ago. We have already achieved around 15% out of that. Then we have target for specific power consumption reduction, waste reduction, fresh water reduction, then social impact, how much, there are few themes that we are working on the social side. So all those targets become relevant when you are reviewing it and giving more importance to them than your normal operations. So that is where the whole binding or the ecosystem within the organization works and, gives I would say, a lot of impetus in the success of this. And last but not the least, CFO's role as a communicator, you communicate with your boards and make them aware what policies are going to be followed, what is happening on that side, and, give them that knowledge. You have to provide that knowledge, and also to the external stakeholders, be it investors, be it your customers, be it your vendors, and if you are able to, give them a right perspective about your ESG journey, believe me, as somebody has said, they are willing to work with you and they really see your perspective and they appreciate. Like when we announced our recent, initiative on the renewable, I got many calls from our investors appreciating what we are trying to do. So people generally will not ask you what kind of paybacks or ROCs, because they know, the managements are delivering and these are important for the continuity of the business. So these are some of the things that we have done in our organization. I hope I've been able to cover your question.
No, I think both of you covered it really well, and I'm happy to see these commitments from the companies that you are representing. Yes, Sonal, please want to add.
I just wanted to make one more point, which I think the viewers may find interesting. So, there is a lot of green bonds which are being raised across the world. Yeah. So just to put things in perspective, we have also raised bonds, and we have put out a target that we'll raise about 40% of our financing will be green bonds. Now, what this also sends out a signal to the investors is that the green bonds do have a commitment that, whatever targets I have put out in my sustainability, I will meet them by X and X year, right? They have that very clearly in the terms and conditions laid out, right? And if we don't achieve that, the coupon there'll be a step up in the coupon, obviously. So we are putting money where our mouth is, the commitment is that serious to, meet our ESG targets.
That also validates that the people are willing to make an investment with you once you are taking those initiatives. And she had rightly mentioned $40 trillion out of 140 trillion, riding on the ESG funds, which is a large chunk, almost 1/3 of the overall global assets or global funds.
Sure. I think great anecdotes here. In fact, we had recently read a report which was released by Bank of America, which said that in 2021 alone, $7 billion funds were raised through the green bonds. That was a huge amount, and that was more than a 600% jump compared to YOY, right? So I think mind-boggling numbers there. And there's one more point which I learned here is that most of the global banks have now, out of the investors, have started looking at green far more aggressively. They're looking at the risk factors of the green and looking at the CFOs who's having that green plan very positively. Sandeep, I will take the same question with you, where Raman and Sonal has presented their views. I would like you also to share your views.
I will first talk about how the governance structure has been put in Hindustan Zinc briefly. While we have at a board level sustainability and ESG committee, we have also partnered with McKinsey, who has put the whole framework. And as Sonal and Raman have touched base, it's not about only a finance topic or CFO topic. What we have done, we have made various communities, like a biodiversity community, which is headed by environment specialist, people community, which is headed by CHRO, similarly supply chain community, finance community, CSR community, communication community. So we have made in a manner that everybody gets interlinked with the ESG goals, and everybody will have to have their own targets. Like in case of finance, my job is to ensure that wherever the DJSI ranking I was, and wherever the gaps are there in terms of governance or disclosure, these kind of things have been put up in the place so that we can navigate these kind of things. Coming back to the things which we are taking off, if we touch base about that, people have talked about in green capex. Sonal has talked about the green capex. I will say we also have to see a new way of looking at the IRR, which is a traditional metrics compared to that. We should move to the ESG adjusted IRRs. What we see, only a few companies as of now really implemented, say, internal carbon pricing and cost of carbon emission in their investment committee as a sensitivity to pressure test the IRR or NPV investment. It may be really a good challenge to take up with the board and make it a part of your investment proposals. How do you take the ESG adjusted IRR, because the internal carbon pricing would be there. This is something new which we are evaluating. Apart from this, we have spoken about the climate change, making it a board priority, having a robust R&D budget also has to be there. And about the accounting and reporting tools, we have to also integrate ESG reporting tool into our financial reporting. We can have a better measure and manage our company's environment performance against the established target. Climate change throughout the business, such as executive compensation, where a link to the climate change mitigation would likely be effective. Sustainability teams, risk teams, integrating the climate information into the strategy, and the most important, the risk management. And to achieve this, at Hindustan Zinc has already created a framework wherever all business decisions are intertwined with the ESG criteria, and all our future investment are also evaluated by the pressure testing IRR to meet sustainable standards.
Okay, meaningful one, Sandeep. Thanks for all these detailed points. In fact, I'm sure the audience enjoying the conversation. On that note, let me take one more question, and this is the question again very important. All of you highlighted the current situation, how you're dealing with it, but I want you to tell us more on the maybe future perspective, or how to achieve the net zero infrastructure goal, and talk more about the economic viability. So if I put the question into context, what are the economic realities of ESG, whether it is economically viable, and being a CFO, what do you think? What would India Inc. require to achieve the net zero infrastructure? I'm sure the government has to also support you. There should be some incentives and there should be some roadmap in order to help you achieve the dream of the ESG. I will start with you, Sonal.
Yeah. See, again, moving from decarbonization to net zero, this journey has to fully play out. It's not there yet. I mean, you cannot go down to zero if we continue with our existing processes. For example, we have a commitment to reduce our CO2 emission from upward of 500 kg to about 475 kg. But that's still 475 kg per ton of CO2. So not everything can, go down that route. So what you need is alternatives, For example, of course, you'll have to go back to things like two things, I would say. One is afforestation. We don't have too much place, but that is one area. Second is the whole technology around carbon capture. How are we really going to deal with this? And is it going to be viable? Can we do it, not do it? And even carbon, once you capture the carbon, you put it in the ground, how long can you keep putting it in the ground? There are other implications of that. So this has to really develop. Second, hydrogen as a technology. Can we replace fossil fuel altogether, have a new fuel for running all the power plants to cement plants to steel plants? Okay, no technology, nothing, very nascent, right? So there has to be a technological breakthrough, in my opinion, to go down that route. As far as capex allocation, etc., is concerned, I think this is worth experimenting. And R&Ds or acquiring companies which are doing this R&D. So a lot of capital has to go into these basic R&D, in my view, which we are also doing. We have made some small investments around the world. Unless we get to doing this, I don't see a big breakthrough coming for a total net zero. Where government can play this role, government can lead some of these high intensive technological revolutions, actually. Create an ecosystem, create some sort of a policy for us to do it. For example, if I do carbon capture today, supposing I put it in the technology, there's a way to do it and I put it in my plant today. I cannot then sell cement because it's good. The cost of carbon capture is equal to cost of producing cement. So the price of cement becomes double, So naturally, no company is going to adopt it in the current form. So that's the cost of going completely green today. Obviously, just like we had seen in solar, the solar energy per unit cost was very high in just 10 years back. Just 10 years, 2005, 4, if you talk, it was upward of 25, 30 rupees per unit. And today, where we are. So I think that technology curve has to play out. So all for R&D and reducing the technology cost for the industry to adopt. As of now, cost-wise, it's difficult. Number two, even regulations will not support it because just the cost for the consumer will really go up if we were to do it.
Okay. Very important thoughts here, Sonal. Raman?
Yeah, your question is very valid. What are the economic realities? And Sonal has tried to touch that. Economic realities are going to be monumental, and they are going to be among us as we move forward because there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the technology front. But first of all, there has to be steps, and I think some of the steps and the direction which government has given are very right. There is a lot of work which has been done on solar, and therefore you see there is a lot of adoption which is happening, and that is benefiting. Like I said, for our textile division, we are going to be in 1 year time 85% entire energy requirement through the green initiatives. But at the cost of repetition, there has to be a common coordination, very strong coordination between India Inc., between the government and the bureaucracy. And second, probably they'll have to look at some low-hanging fruits. If they have found that, okay, the transportation can be made green through EV and by creating a right infrastructure of creating those stations, charging stations, probably you'll have to go toward that direction because that is also causing a lot of carbon emissions. Then urban smart traffic management. I'm sure some of some of the private sector companies are coming in a big way in finding a solutions how to make the transportation smart and also carbon free. So that is where some of the work can be done. Fourth, how to some of the low hanging fruits, how do you have some resources like biogas and all or biomass which can be used as a fuel, but how to create an infrastructure to make a proper usage of that. So some of those infrastructure needs to get created, which can be done faster, like solar has been done over a period of time. However, some technologies will probably emerge over a period of time. The idea is, like a lot of IITs are coming into this, a lot of startups are, playing a role in this, and they'll have to take more lead along to find out a right solution, which can be cost-effective solution. And as we move this journey, probably we'll have those solutions emerging. As of now, like I said, for our business also, we want to become green on the boiler side, but the technology is not there. But it's not that it's not going to be there over a longer period of time. Something will emerge, and the corporations will have to make an investment. And as Sandeep has said earlier, it has to be holistically looked at, not purely looking at the payback of that particular thing, but as a holistically how is going to be beneficial as we move forward, because fossil fuel over a period of time is going to become expensive. Like there are carbon tax which have come in Europe, and they are humongous, 60, 70 euro. And if those kind of things start coming in India, maybe 10, 20 years later, then this fuel will be very uneconomical. So at that time, the realities will sink in. So it's better to take effective steps just at this point in time. Similarly, another point which came to my mind is, creating some kind of industrial parks. I've seen that happening in China, where, you create common utilities and the raw material or a waste for one industry can be a raw material for another industry. So those kind of themes can also be looked at, common, like we require CO2, but why do I need to produce CO2 for some of my chemical reaction? Can I buy it from somebody if somebody is producing that and then use it and circulate it back to some other place? So that kind of initiatives can also be looked at as we move forward.
Okay. Noted your points, Raman. Sandeep?
So if I talk about the economic realities, I will touch upon the ESG rating part. So if we see the ESG rating has become increasingly important in investors' decision. If you see investors are catching up on the ESG and they are ready to act, a major takeaway is that investors are paying more and more attention to ESG risk and opportunity that is being faced by the company they invest in, and they are poised to take the action. So in a recent survey which I was reading, nearly 80% have said that ESG was an important factor in their investor decision making. So this has become a reality. Almost 70% of the thought of the people that ESG factors should figure into their executive compensation targets, which I just based upon in my earlier conversation, and about 50% have expressed willingness to divest from the company that did not take sufficient action on the ESG issue. So if we really talk about the economic reality, it has really become a part of the part and parcel of the overall company's sustenance. If we don't act today, we may become the redundant. So from the investor's perspective, a company which is a large listed, we have to become a climate leader as well. And here as a CFO, as a role, I was saying the intertwined our decisions to be mixed with the total shareholder return versus the total societal impact. That has to be linked it together, and that's how we should be able to basically survive for the longer term perspective.
Another point here, Amol, if
Sure.
See, the one point which Raman and Sandeep are making is the coordination with the government and India Inc. I'll give you a very small example of this. All the housing that is going to be built from here to 2020, 70% of that's commercial and real estate, has not been built till now. It's yet to be built, number one. Number two, the residential and commercial housing or in real estate in India consumes about 30-35% of energy. And if you have a green building, this energy consumption comes down by 20-30%. So when we talk about let's say a green building norm or a building code, it's a very simple thing to do for the government, which will help all the stakeholders. And imagine 70% of the inventory has to still be built. And if you put in these kind of incentives or policies and mandatory requirements, it can just kickstart the whole green construction in India. And the government in its own procurement can look at these, specifying these recycling or green products. It just will give an impetus, and it's really a cohesive policy involving everybody. Similarly, can be said of other things like renewable energy as well.
I think to add a little more on that, if you allow me, Amol, is there are a lot of action which is happening at, I would say, It's being organized by various chambers of commerce like CII or SCMs, where all these bodies, the government, the bureaucracy, the India Inc. people are participating. But I think, and IITs and other startups are coming together. But there has to be like a very focused approach on this, like Sonal has just mentioned, so that the action which can be done or low-hanging fruits can be tackled first, which may not involve those kind of financial commitments, but certain way of working probably can give you a lot of results upfront, and then once you have those successes, probably those can be replicated as and when the technology evolves.
For a moment, it looked like it's going to be a never-ending session on a topic which is very crucial but not widely spoken in the industry. And I'm really, thanks to myself and my team also for choosing this topic. We were actually in a dilemma whether to go ahead with this topic as a theme for the session. But I'm really happy that, we corrected the right theme. And I'm really glad that all of you shared meaningful thoughts here. Wish I could have taken more sessions, but let me tell you, we'll continue this journey and we'll keep you calling. We'll keep calling you and we'll take your inputs going ahead as well. Thank you, Mr. Chopra. Thank you, Ms. Shrivastava. And thank you, Mr. Modi, for sharing the meaningful thoughts here at ETCFO Leadership Summit and talking about the economic realities of ESG and the net zero infrastructure target. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for sharing your perspective and all the knowledge around the topic. Let's proceed to the next session. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your continuous support, enthusiastic participation, and staying connected.